Okay, welcome back everybody to Ignite. I hope you had a great week at family reunion. For those of you just joining us, we fast forwarded through all the ahas. So reach out to your colleagues and they'll tell you about it. So yeah, Jerome's question ultimately with regards to buyers and the anatomy of a buyer transaction, which we're currently working through. I would answer that question, Jerome, what should we do? You know what? Great question. What are your thoughts on that? Tell me why you're a buyer today. Let's review the motivation to purchase, right? Is this the house that you need to live in over and above all others? Do you understand how the market works today? Do you understand that for all intents and purposes, the asking price is the minimum level, is the minimum expectation for the seller? Are you prepared to go to battle to win a property? Are you prepared to do some of the things that we find that most buyers need to do to come out on top in multiple offer situations, like waive contingencies and make over asking offers, right? And so I would, to me, that question asked from a buyer is another opportunity to ask more questions to help them solidify, is this really right for me, right? Sometimes you might get to a point where someone says, you know what, I think at the end of the day, thank you so much for asking me all that, because as I'm answering your questions, what I'm realizing is I don't think I want to play this game. And then you get to say, you know what, great, I support that decision. I'm curious, how does that jive with your motivation to purchase, right? Because if someone's coming in and has to, like, they're getting a new job here and they need to live someplace because they just sold their house in Denver, right? Well, them not choosing to play this game drives them into only one of two things if they have to live someplace. So should we be looking at rental opportunities for you to see if you can buy yourself some time and perhaps enter the buying market when it's not quite as frenzied? Or is this just the market that you're called upon to buy in, right? So they get to answer those questions themselves. One of the things that I have absolutely taken a vow on is to stop giving advice, right? And I know that a lot of us think that that's a big part of our job is to bring advice to the table. I disagree with that. I think that our job is consultative. I think that I don't have all the answers, and I'll tell you what. One of the most freeing days in my entire real estate career was the day I finally realized I didn't have to have all the answers. That my opinions didn't matter all that much. What mattered was my ability to ask questions and help people self-discover the answers on their own, because they all know their answers. They all know them. They just don't always know where to find them or how to verbalize them, or they're not courageous enough yet because they need to borrow some of your courage, right? Like I tell you guys all the time, if you're not confident about what you're about to do with a seller or a buyer, trust that I think that you're awesome and borrow some of my confidence. Well, they need to borrow some of your courage to make a decision about entering a market or taking a step back from the market. And so for some people, what you may be hearing me say is, well, they're looking for me to make their answer, to help them make the answer for them. And the answer is yes, most people are looking for assistance. But I think the version of assistance that we offer is to help guide them through a conversation ultimately with themselves to get to the answer versus giving them your answer, because your answer may not be right for them, right? And I don't say that from a salesman's perspective, right? Because a salesman's perspective is now's always the time to buy, now's always the time to sell. And that's not fair or the right path either, right? Which is why I think consultative selling is a far more noble calling than just salesman-y selling. I don't know if that answers that, Jerome, but that's my best offer. And I think Donna has something to add to it.
Thank you. Yeah, so everybody on this Zoom knows that everything that Rick just said is absolutely spot on. It couldn't be truer. It's absolutely what's going on. Here's the one other thing. Sometimes they also learn, well, often they learn by the experience of actually going through it. So yes, you do the economics lesson. And yes, you also tell them this is not the market for everyone. It may not be right for you. But knowing what we know and knowing that you love your house, this house, and knowing what your budget is, what is the best offer that you want to bring to the table? Let's go in with that. And we do it. It either gets accepted or rejected or modified. We've talked about that. But let's say it gets rejected. When it gets rejected, my job is to reach out to the listing agent and get a little bit of feedback as to why. And that helps not only me learn, but when I share that with my clients, it helps them learn because it's not always price. It could be price, it could be terms and condition, it could be cash versus a mortgage, it could be they have a longer, shorter closing time or a longer, you find out that information, you keep feeding that back to their clients to the point, I mean, I literally lived this morning. My clients, a house just came on. They saw it before me. They contacted me. They said, we love it. We want to see it as soon as possible. And oh, by the way, it's listed at 618. They've already started kicking around we're going to go in at like 630. What do you think about that? Should it be 650? I don't know. So they're already having the conversations that we've been having. And oh, by the way, this will be our third offer on a property. So they learn, they get it, they come with you. So that baptism by fire, that walking through the process often is the thing that really allows them to make the best decisions. And you just go with them, like Rick said, just being the consultant. You know how this all works. You're just helping them walk through it and understand it.
Yeah, that's an excellent wrap up to that entire conversation. Thank you for that, Donna. Jerome, does that help? Cool beans. All right, so once they've made that decision about how they're going to proceed with their offer, which, by the way, as you heard me say this morning no, I didn't say it this morning. Maybe I said it yesterday morning. All the days just kind of roll into one. I think I said it yesterday morning on the 9 o'clock call, right? Sometimes to be the winner today means you just go in full price or better without even seeing the property, right? Sight unseen offers are a thing. And a month ago, they were less of a thing, right? And so somebody said it either on the mastermind earlier today or yesterday morning on the 9 a.m. call, that like if you're still using the techniques from 4 months ago or 6 months ago, like they're not winning today. It's like it's new stuff every day, and the new thing now is kind of sight unseen. The idea of entering an arena that says some of your buyers may have to be courageous enough to make an offer sight unseen. Those are, I'm not saying they're easy conversations to have, right? Because for some of them, they're difficult to have with some buyers. Some buyer, you'll say it to some buyers and say, here's what we're noticing as a strategy that people are using to win. I'm curious if this is a strategy you'd like to use, right? That's not advice, it's options, right? Because I'm the options guy. I'm going to put the options on the table. And you get to have that conversation with them. This is what we're noticing. Are you willing to utilize? Is that a strategy you're willing to use? Some people will look at you and say, what are you, nuts? Like sight unseen, like not even going to visit the house? Like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about utilizing the data online, the videos and the photos and the description to decide that this is probably something that you would that meets your criteria, and going whole hog to see if you can win. That is not a game for everybody, right? And it's okay. And I think the other thing that I would add to all of this is your job is to support their decisions, right? Your job isn't to help them make decisions to necessarily buy or not buy, or list or not list. Your job is to support their decisions with fact, right? Love it. We
Rick,
haven't.
I was gonna, oh, sorry. Can I
We haven't
can I ask you
done.
one thing? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just noticing the love fest for Gilbert in the chat. Go ahead,
Well,
Nicole.
I have my first offer going through right now. It's accepted, where the appraisal came in today, or was issued today. We won over, there were 7 other offers, and we wrote this letter, that said, like, these are the reasons why, thanks to Margaret. And today she comes in and she says, I wonder if we can push back the closing date. And I was like, I don't think so. And she says, well, it'd be better for me instead of closing in March if it closed in April. But these people picked her because she was ready to go. And so now my whole day has been a field of, you don't want to lose this house over this.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to handle it. I just keep saying like that you should. So I put her with Nancy at Westport Mortgage. So I don't, Nancy's been taking over and saying, we can ask, but be careful.
Yeah, and I think that is the way you move that forward, is to help them understand, look, so Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, here's the thing. I can certainly see if that's something the sellers are willing to do. I just want to put you on notice that they chose you based on price and terms, this term being one of those things over 7 other offers. Before I go back and even float the idea, if me floating the idea has the sellers choose somebody else, how is that going to make you feel, right? How will you respond to that? Because it is possible that me just floating that balloon sends everybody on the other side into a whole big tizzy, and all of a sudden they're withdrawing their acceptance for you and saying yes to somebody else, right? So I want you to be certain that that's what you want me to do. I will do it as tenderly and cautiously as possible to, again, just float the balloon. Just know that there could be consequences to that. I'm curious, if you had to move forward with the offer as written, is that possible in your world still? Right? Again, keep asking those questions, keep asking those questions, keep asking those questions. Understanding that convenience on the buyer side today is not really part of the conversation. I get that this might be more convenient, and yet you were chosen based on the fact that what you wrote up the first time is convenient for the sellers. And in this scenario, the convenience of the sellers, I understand it's a kind of a bummer to hear, but the convenience of the sellers is what got you the house. And I think we have to stay really focused on not rocking the boat. I don't know if that's helpful at all, but that's where I would go with it, right? Elena, did you have a question?
Yes, previous conversation, sight unseen. How are sellers feeling about sight unseen buyers? I want to ask everybody, because back in old market, it was a big thing. If the buyers didn't see the house and you bring an offer, the listing agent would call me and make sure that that's what it was, and what happens if they don't like it or something happens. So I want to know what it's now.
Yeah, so go ahead, Alex. You have an answer for that?
No, I actually am quite curious as to how often that may fall apart. And of course, that's impossible data.
Yeah, so the answer that I would offer is it depends. I don't know that we can back that up statistically just yet. And if a listing agent asked me, well, why should the sellers say yes when the folks haven't even seen the property yet? The answer could be, you know what, I appreciate that, and yet they have been in the field long enough to know the house when it comes to the table, right? And so, and they're willing to sign a contract to commit themselves to the property. Their only out is a 5-day attorney review period, right? And so in that 5-day attorney review period, we will be certain to have the inspections done and them have walk through the house, so that the most amount of risk here for the sellers is a risk that's going to be there whether they've seen it or not in that 5-day attorney review period. That's, I think, how I would address that.
No, but your buyers can say, oh, we don't like this house, we don't want it anymore. And then what you do as an agent?
Well, if you represent the buyer. Well, so again, if they're
The
within
buyer.
their rights in terms of the contract, and they see it and they don't like it, you call the listing agent and say, guess what? Sorry, they changed their mind. We're going shopping. I mean, I think the first thing you might do is ask some questions, right? Talk to me about, it looks like we have this top 5 must-have list. It looks like this house meets this criteria. Talk to me about not moving forward. There's always the possibility, even in a non-crazy market, where buyers might change their mind. Sorry, I thought you were asking something different. I thought you were asking how to address the seller's concern about accepting an offer from a buyer that.
That's both the seller's concerns, but your buyers can also turn around on you, and then you are in a hot spot as an agent representing the buyer. After you settled with the seller that, oh, please accept our offer, and then they come and then they say, meh.
Yeah, well, and I will say I'm not sure I see it as a hot spot. I see it just objectively and factually, right? There is a period of time where transactions are not solidified, and yes, the reality is at any time either party could turn around and change their minds. And I think that from an agent perspective, we just have to be certain that we are factual, calm, and objective to simply communicate that to the other side if it should happen, right? With the relevant, I am so sorry this occurred. It looks like the buyer is going to go in a different direction. The good news is that you had 6 other offers, so hopefully we're getting to you in a time period where you can go and secure one of those. And if there's any way I can help in helping you secure that, let me know. It's not a matter of saying, what, sorry, sucks to be you, we're out, right? But it's a level of conversation that retains that level of professionalism and yet still objectively represents the client. Remember, you're not there to represent anyone but the buyer client. And so you're not there to make the listing agent feel good, and you're not there to make the sellers feel good, right? That's not part of the job description when you represent the buyers. It oftentimes helps when everyone gets along, but when tough decisions have to be made, the support that you throw your weight behind is that of the client that hired you and who you have fiduciary responsibilities for. Debbie, and then Carol, and then Robert.
I also think you have to know your buyer, because that strategy is not for every buyer. So if you have a buyer who kind of knows the market, you've been out, you've educated them, and they're ready to take that action, then they're ready to take that action. You're not there to persuade them to do something that they're not comfortable with. And what Rick said is 100% true. In a plain vanilla transaction, a buyer can back out in the first 2 weeks for any reason whatsoever. So what's the difference?
Yeah, because and you know what, I think the point to underline here is sometimes we want to make the market moving this way or doing things slightly differently than we might do them in a more balanced market more different than they really are, right? Because they're not quite that different. And the reality is, again, I have lived my entire life and run my entire business, built and run my entire business from the position of I'm not going to solve problems that haven't actually shown up yet, right? It's that doesn't mean that we aren't forward looking. It doesn't mean we're not troubleshooting things along the way. But I've always chosen to actually take the step, continue to take the steps until the step shows up and says, okay, this is probably not a good step to take, and then I'll handle that situation there. Where do I go from there once I've taken the step that now has to be taken back? But until then, I'm just going to keep taking steps forward. And what I have found is that more times than not, you just get to the finish line. You just keep taking the steps forward, right? So be careful about the what if mentality, because it can sometimes stop you before it can stop you from taking that next step to get you to the finish line. I forget who else had their hand raised.
Carol.
Yes, Carol, go for it.
Hi, Ruth. I had that situation happen to me not too long ago. I was the listing agent, and my clients, because of COVID, were very nervous about having people come in the house. So they requested sight unseen offers. And we got one in, we negotiated it, we got a great price. We're ready to do the contracts. The buyer broker calls me, says, you know what? They changed their mind. They found another house they would like better. So I had to go to my seller. They were very disappointed, but these things happened and we had to move on. And so that was my experience.
Yeah, and I think the takeaway from Carol's story is that I'll change the word that I'm about to use from what entered my mind to disappointment happens, right? You can replace the word disappointment with a number of different words, right? But disappointment happens, right? And so the reality is, as a listing agent or a buyer's agent, your job isn't necessarily to steer people clear of disappointment, because you can't control some of the disappointment that comes their way. Instead, your role is to help guide them through the disappointment so that they can very quickly recognize that, again, if stuff didn't happen for us to help clients deal with, we wouldn't have a role. We wouldn't have an industry, right? If this was simple enough for everyone to just do on their own, we wouldn't exist. And so when things go sideways, when disappointment comes their way, again, I've taken to just calling that something. That's called Tuesday in my world, right? Because stuff just happens. That's just the way it goes. I love that. All right, let's keep pushing forward on the anatomy of buyer transaction. So we're at number 8, whopping number 8. Write up the offer, right? Write up the offer. And so your offer is going to be complete. That includes some kind of a cover letter, right? You all heard me talk about the buyer love letter saga, the whole drama around love letters on Monday morning, right? If you didn't hear that, I think it was it was actually purposely not recorded. So you'll have to check in with your colleagues to get the download on that one. But writing some kind of a cover letter, or having your buyer clients write that cover letter, right, to send along with the offer. I also like just kind of a summary, whether it's part of the cover letter or page 2. It's kind of a summary of the major points of the offer, so that it's easily recognized, kind of what the price is, what the financing looks like, what the terms are. Boom, 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 so they don't have to work through a 4-page contract or work through 2 pages of a purchase agreement. Remember, not all listing agents are as adept at all forms that offers are presented on as others. And what I mean by that is, you may have a listing agent who is very much ingrained in the kind of northern Fairfield County way of doing business on 1-page offers to purchase. And your buyers choose to write it up on a 4-page standard contract from the MLS. There are some listing agents who will be like, oh my God, what do I do with this, right? I can actually tell you quite honestly that there are some listing agents who might receive that and say, this isn't legal, you can't do that here. We're not allowed to do that in Fairfield County, right? Please note that's incorrect. And yet because of their lack of experience with a certain document, having that summary page may help them help the seller understand what the is about, because they may not have a familiarity with the document you're submitting it on. And then, of course, a copy of the binder check, right? Generally speaking, right, we write a check for 1%. What can somebody tell me about the 1%? Is that the law? Is the law 1%? Can you do 0%?
Yes, you could.
You can do 0.
Yeah, sure you could.
You can do whatever you want. It's not the law.
Could you do 5%?
Yeah.
Sure.
You could.
Right?
Yeah.
Could you put down more? I bought a house this past weekend, sight unseen as well. And my strategy now is I put 10% down right up front, right away. I'm going to end up putting at least 10% down anyway. So I just write the check up front. What's the difference if I write 1% and then 9% a week later, or just write the 10% right up front? I want the seller to see that I have the funds and I'm willing to push them out onto the table to secure the property, right? So I just 1% doesn't exist in my world anymore. It's 10% or bust, right? And if you're looking to win multiple offer scenarios, having more down up front makes a lot of sense. Please note, if you've ever purchased property, where's Nicole? She's purchased property all over the country, right? So what Nicole can tell you is when you purchase property in California, they don't do the 1% thing, do they? It's like $250, right? You something nominal to hold the contract. Is that right?
Yes. There's never a lawyer. That was all new for us moving here.
Yeah, right. And so you may have people coming from California who the last time they bought wrote a $250 check just to kind of hold the contract. And now they're buying an $800,000 house here. And we're asking them to write it minimally 1%. And they're like, whoa, really? I don't understand. Why do I have to write that much of a check? And so the answer is reasonable and customary, right? Here, what is reasonable and customary is minimally 1% down. It's not the law. They can certainly do whatever they'd like. The problem with someone coming from California and wanting to write a $250 check to hold the contract, especially in a multiple offer scenario, is that they may not seem as strong as they really are because they're using what's customary from where they're coming from instead of what's customary here, right? So helping them understand that minimally 1% is what's customary here, and sellers and listing agents may look not favorably on something that is less than that. It could put you at a negotiating disadvantage. We want to make sure that you have every advantage, right? Jerome, unmute and ask me that question. I'm not sure what you mean by that.
So what I'm asking is, when you're with the buyer and they say, hey, I want to execute an offer,
Yes.
and you take that check, who's that check written to?
Great question. So the check is written to the buyer's attorney.
I saw that, but how do we know that? Like, so if I take somebody and we see houses, when we come back, the buyer's attorney isn't listed on the MLS.
Well, so the buyers are your clients, right?
Right.
So it's your client's attorney, the buyer's attorney.
Oh, what if they don't have an attorney yet?
I don't recommend that. I recommend that they start shopping for an attorney the day you meet them. They should hire their attorney prior to the first time they go out with you, so that this exact scenario does not occur, right? Because what happens when they don't hire an attorney before they start going out to see houses with you is they like something, you're going like crazy to get everything done, and then it takes them 3 days to call a bunch of attorneys and start interviewing, and one of the attorneys is on vacation and one of them is not in that day or in court or whatever. You've got to pull that up and have them have those conversations early. Frankly, part of the consultation at the end, once they've hired you, is to say, okay, so here's what's going to happen next. Contact this attorney and introduce yourself, and or if you're looking to hire somebody different than who I'm going to suggest to you, let's get that working, because you want to be as ready as possible to say yes to a seller the second you find a house that you love.
Do we have an in-house attorney? Because my understanding, again, bear with my green horns here, but it was that they made the check out to the brokerage. But that obviously is academic, I guess.
So in our brokerages, that used to be the case, right? There are still many brokerages that have the 1% or the first check made out to the brokerage. We, as of January 1st of this year, no longer accept those checks, and we push them to the buyer's attorneys for lots of different reasons, which I'm not going to go into now. But that is our process.
Okay.
In our brokerages, they get made to the buyer's attorney.
Okay, so we should have some attorneys' business cards ready to go to our buyers then. Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah, and absolutely. And so the idea, and so we do have an attorney partner. Her name is Ariane O'Donnell. If you want to reach out to her and or reach out to some of your colleagues or ALC members and ask who they might recommend if you're looking for some suggestions.
Okay, I thank you for covering that, because that was never covered before this moment right here.
Certainly, no, I'm glad to do it. And the idea of and so Elena asks, first check to the listing brokerage or the attorney. It depends on where you are located, right? Outside of Fairfield County, for the most part, checks are written to the listing brokerage as trustee, right? Inside of Fairfield County, many agencies have the checks written to the buyer's agency, and more brokerages are moving away from that and having the checks go directly to the buyer's attorney. And yes, buyer's attorney, not seller's attorney, right? So I know it can be a little bit confusing. Trust me, every single time I buy one of my properties in Waterbury, I screw that up, right? I write the check to my attorney, I send the copy off with the contract, and the listing agent gets back and says, okay, but you've got to send that to my brokerage. I'm like, oh God, yes, that's right, right? So recognize that depending on where you're doing business and where the listing agency might be located, even if the listing itself is located in Fairfield County, but the listing brokerage is located to the east or to the north, you may be asked to have the check redirected to the listing brokerage. At the end of the day, we encourage you to A, follow the instructions of the listing brokerage. And if there are no instructions, B, have the check written to the buyer's attorney. Make sense? Beautiful.
So just for clarity, so we just have to ask the listing agent because, you know, I border two different, I'm in Litchfield and Fairfield counties. So just ask the listing agent what their preference is.
So you certainly could do that. I would, generally speaking, if you're going to be Litchfield, Fairfield, for the most part, your buyers are going to be writing their checks to the buyer's attorney. So you could almost decide that you will go ahead and err on that side first, and then if they have to, if it gets redirected to the listing brokerage, just have them write a new check. Remember, until the offer is actually accepted, you're just sending a copy of a check anyway. And so once the offer is reviewed by the listing agent, they will come back, and if any changes need to be made, they'll ask you to make those changes at that point in time.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And so the rest of number 8 are all your disclosures, right? So just make sure that you have all the disclosures signed. They're typically hanging on the listing. If they're not on the listing to download, you can call the listing agent and ask them to send to you. And so you're building that offer with, again, some kind of a cover letter with maybe some kind of a summary, and then the actual offer to purchase, which is written on one of 3 different forms, either an offer to purchase, purchase agreement, or a standard form contract. Again, I will, one of we've run 2 forms classes during our Ignite class. I owe you 1 more, and the 1 more that I owe you is to go through the offer documents, right? We've gone through the listing documents and the buyer's documents. I owe you 1 more, which will be scheduled for next week, so watch for that. It'll be Forms 101 all over again, but it'll be specific for offer documents. And we'll go through all 3 of them: the offer to purchase, the 2-page purchase agreement, and the 4-page standard real estate contract in the MLS. And I'll walk you through each of them.
Eric?
Yes, sir.
I need clarity on something, because
Yes.
I'm not sure how this worked after like I purchased my investment property a couple of months ago. But when it comes down to the earnest money, does the agent normally submit this with the offer, or can it be submitted after the offer has been accepted?
So great question. Submit a copy of the check with the offer. And then once the offer is accepted and you now have a signed transaction, that amount of money needs to now be deposited with either the escrow account for the listing agency or the escrow account for your buyer's attorney within 3 business days. So you hold on to the check until you have a signed document signed by both buyer and seller, and then you have 72 business hours from the day that the seller counter executes the offer document or the contract to get that into an escrow account. And again, based on the previous conversation, depending on geography, it'll be sent either to the listing brokerage or to the buyer's attorney, but you have 3 days. So you're not submitting the actual check with the offer. Submit just a copy, and then once you have a deal, then you actually disperse the check. Does that help?
Yeah, but the reason I'm asking is because the person that I was working with, and this was before I became an agent, you know, after the offer has been accepted, that's when they asked me to, you know, get a money order, get a check of the earnest money, and then, you know, obviously mail the receipt or bring the receipt to my lawyer. So I'm not sure if there's a wrong or right way to go about it. That's what I'm asking.
Well, and so what I would say is, as a listing agent, I want to see a copy of a check, right? So most listing agents are going to want to see some proof of money. So, you know, in that scenario, you got away with not having a copy of some kind of funds be presented and still had an accepted offer. If I were the listing agent, I would have pushed back on the buyer's agent to say, give me some kind of a copy of some funds, so that I saw that some check was written. So it may have just been an anomaly that you experienced.
Okay.
Okay. All right, number 9, present the offer to the listing agent and or the sellers if you've worked that out to get that directly to the sellers. That doesn't happen terribly often, but it can happen in certain circumstances with permission from the listing agent. If geography permits, deliver the offer to the listing agent in person. If not, scan and email all the documents to the listing agent. And then please pick up the phone and call the listing agent to say, hey, just sent you an offer. Can you confirm receipt? Right? Don't just send it off into cyberland and assume that someone has received it, right? People miss emails all the time. And if you're advocating for your buyer, you want to pick up the phone and make sure that that person has received the offer. Remember, it's your job to present the offer excitedly as it has been written by the client. This is not the place for an editorial. So here's what I mean by that. I have watched very in horror as some agents have picked up the phone to say, so I'm sending the email off to Debbie Orr, and she's the listing agent, and I call Debbie and say, hey, Debbie, it's Rick Scott. Look, I just sent you this offer on 123 Main Street, and trust me, I know it's probably going to go nowhere. I mean, don't shoot the messenger. It's not my number. I mean, I did everything I could to try and get them to make a reasonable offer, but holy Christmas, you have no idea what it's like dealing with these people. How is that advocating for your buyer client? Okay, hint, it's not, right? That's all about you. That's all about you, because I'm afraid that Debbie might think I'm no good at my job because I submitted an offer that maybe is a low ball, or maybe has terms that seem kind of out there. Yeah, I'm absolutely not making it up. I mean, as a matter of fact, I probably didn't go deep enough into the drama that sometimes gets whipped up with these conversations. Guys, remember, your job is to present the offer excitedly, right? Even if you think it sucks, that's okay. It doesn't matter, right? You've got to stand behind it and support it. Hey, Debbie, Rick Scott, just wanted to let you know I'm really excited. We just sent you off an offer on 123 Main Street. Wondered if you could take a look at that and talk with the sellers and get back to us as quickly as possible. Hey, and I'm just curious, knowing that it's 5:21 this on a Tuesday, any chance that we may have word back from you or the sellers this evening? And if so, any idea what time, so I can make sure I'm watching my phone. Right, I want to ask those questions so that I'm putting Debbie in a position to need to answer me. I'm not just going to send her something and hope for the best, right? In her mind, she may think tomorrow at this time is a perfect time to get back to me. Trust me when I tell you, the buyers I represent do not think 24 hours is a reasonable amount of time to have an answer. They do not think that. A week and a half ago, I made an offer on a property, and it took the listing agent 3.5 days to come back to me. 3.5 days, right? I buy a property for a living. I'm very objective, and I was still anxious about it, right? This wasn't someplace I was going to live. And so if I get anxious and uptight about getting an answer on objective investment property purchases, imagine your buyers and what they're going through for a house that they're going to live in, right? So it's incumbent upon me to have that conversation with Debbie. And maybe Debbie says, you know, we're going to do the best we can to get you an answer tonight. And yet it may be tomorrow morning. Excellent. You know what? Would you do me a favor? Could you minimally shoot me a text by 8 o'clock if we're not going to have an answer back by 8? If it'll be tomorrow morning, can you just let me know that? Because now I'm going to call the buyers and say, look, I just heard from the listing agent. They're doing their best to get an answer, but it looks like it's going to be tomorrow morning. So hang in there, hang tight. Yes, ma'am.
You remind me of the expression, constant communication creates client, confident clients. There you go. Creates confident clients. And this is a moment in time when constant communication is necessary and you need to keep it rolling. Needs to be.
Indeed. That, and by the way, time is not your friend in any of this. Time is not your buyer's friend, right? Moving things swiftly along keeps everybody focused on the end game. And so time is not your friend. But the point is, no editorials, right? If Debbie thinks the offer is terrible, maybe she says to me, you know what, Rick, while I have you on the phone, hold on, let me just open it and go through it. And she opens it and says, what, are you kidding me? Do these people think they're going to steal this house? Remember, it's still your job to support the client and the offer that they've made. Hey, I appreciate that. And yet what I would encourage us both to do is let's stay focused on what the clients are looking for. So perhaps the sellers will have the same answer as you just did, or perhaps they may have a separate answer. If you would do me the favor of presenting it as objectively as possible to the sellers and then get back to us and let us know what the sellers have to say, we would so appreciate that. Thank you so much. Look so forward to doing business with you. Right? Support, support, support. Debbie can choose to respond to it however she chooses. I'm going to choose to continue to support the process and encourage support of the offer. Number 10, ask the listing agent when you might expect to hear back from them. You just heard me talk about that. Number 11, monitor the response from the sellers. Don't assume that since you haven't heard back that there's no answer. As a matter of fact, if you haven't heard back, I would assume that there is an answer. It's just not an answer that's being communicated to you. Right? And what that means is sometimes when there's no answer, it means that they've gone in a different direction and haven't let you know that yet. I can tell you that my 3.5 days ended with, I'm so sorry it's taken us this long to get back to you. The sellers decided not to sell the property and is pulling it off the market. Right? Okay, well, whatever. And yet I knew something was up. Because it doesn't take when you're the only offer on the table, it doesn't take 3.5 days to get an answer, right? I didn't ask them to send it in Morse code or you know, have the answer written by monks. It was a pretty simple yes or no. So just recognize that what experience tells you is if it takes too much time, there's a reason, and now you need to dive into what that reason is and get some answers. The end of 11 says, quell your buyer's anxiety by being over communicative, right? Debbie just gave us that. Number 12, when a response does come through, take the information down and then communicate the information back to the client objectively. This is also not a place for an editorial. And here's what I mean by that, right? So Georgia is my buyer client, and Debbie comes back to me and says, so, you know, Rick, we've got a lot of interest, and you know, they're going to counter your full price offer with $10,000 over asking. So wait, can that happen? If your clients make a full price offer, there's no other offers on the table, can the sellers come back and say, we counter you at $10,000 over?
Yes.
Yeah, of course they can. It's their house. Right? They can do whatever they choose. They may lose Georgia because Georgia may say, well, I'm not doing that. Or They may end up selling their house for 10,000 over asking to Georgia because Georgia decides that that's within the realm of what is reasonable for her and she really wants to live in that house. Here's the point I'm making. When Debbie comes back to me and delivers that information, I have two choices. Here's the wrong choice. Hey, Georgia, it's Rick Scott. You are not going to believe the answer that we just got. These sellers, I don't know who they think they are. I don't know if it's the listing agent who's driving this or the sellers who are just like, thinking that they rule the roost here. But they're actually asking for $10,000 over the asking price. And yes, I asked if there were multiple offers and they said no. So you're the only one on the table. They're being totally greedy about this. And so, I don't even know what to say. I'm so sorry. I mean, please don't shoot the messenger. Guys, if you never say, please don't shoot the messenger as long as you live, that would be okay with me. That is one of the worst phrases that real estate agents say. It's such a cop-out on not taking responsibility for anything that's going on in the transaction. It drives me berserk. Now, here's the problem. The way I just communicated that to Georgia. Now, those of you who have sold real estate or have listened to real estate agents, am I making up that communication? There are some agents who absolutely communicate in that manner. And here's what I want to warn you about. When you take such a stand against the information that's coming back and communicate that way to your buyer, all I've done is help Georgia decide that the sellers are being unfair, that they are the enemy, that perhaps the listing agent is complicit in all of this unfairness, that she's sitting there thinking, oh, you know what, I would pay $10,000 more for this house, but now I'm making her think that that's a bad decision because of my reaction. I'm not encouraging her, I'm not being supportive, I'm not even being objective. I'm giving an opinion subjectively based on what I think Georgia will react, how I think Georgia will react. And that is a massive mistake. It's a huge assumption on my part. And what I have learned over time, trust me, I've done this right and I've done it wrong. I will be transparent and tell you I have delivered the information incorrectly because I was upset by the response. Guys, you got to turn that off. And you've got to now, I have to call Georgia to say, hey, Georgia, it's Rick Scott. I'm excited to let you know that we do have a counter. The counter from the seller is $10,000 over the offer that you just made. And so what they're accepting of all of your other terms. Closing date looks fine. They're thrilled with the level of financing and the dates for the inspection and whatnot. And they're in agreement with all of that. They're just simply looking based on current interest and market conditions. They're looking for an extra $10,000 to say yes to you today. I'm curious, based on everything that we've just discussed, is that something you're willing to do? And then Georgia gets to make just to answer the question. There's no drama. There's no our hair's not on fire. We're not running around like crazy people, right? And so I really want to make the point to you that, man, you know what? Your own opinions can really serve to as a disservice to the whole process and a disservice to your client. Remember, in this scenario, George would be thrilled to pay an extra 10. She'd be thrilled not to, but she certainly isn't willing to lose the property over an extra $10,000 that we already had this conversation because we prepped her for the eventuality of having to go over asking. And so we've already had conversations with our mortgage partners with Georgia, the buyer, to say 10,000 over asking is this much more in a mortgage payment. So Georgia knows that by saying yes to 10,000 over asking, she's going to pay $32.77 more a month. And she's willing to do that. Right? Do you see how preparation and objectivity will win the day far more than hair on fire, oh my goodness, drama? Right? When your hair is on fire, no good decisions get made and you don't communicate properly. The only thing you stand to gain is having your client feel like their hair is on fire as well. And now you're so busy putting each other's hair out that there's no real communication, right? Margaret, what do you got for us?
I'm just thinking, it sounds like when you're a parent of a young child and the kid falls, if you go, oh my God, are you okay? And then they freak out versus it's okay, it's all good. It's almost like that, right?
It's exactly like that. That is a perfect, perfect analogy, right? If you freak out, the kid sees you freak out and bursts into tears. If you don't freak out, even if the child is hurt and you don't freak out, oftentimes they don't even cry. Oh my goodness, what do you have there? Oh, no worries. Let's get a quick bandage on that. It hurts. Oh, I know. Yikes. You know what? Squeeze my finger as hard as you can. Right? But it's so true. So thank you for that, Margaret, because it's a perfect analogy. Number 13. Remember, we talked about this on the seller side. Every single time a counter comes back to your buyer, you're reminding them that they have ARM, right? Accept, reject, or modify, because we want them to feel as though they are in control. Even in the example I just gave you, when I come back and have a counter of $10,000 over the asking price for Georgia, I'm still going to remind her, the good news, Georgia, is that even if that wasn't the counter you were, or the answer you were hoping for, you still are in control of this process. You have accept, reject, modify. And so I'm curious, which of those do you choose, right? You can say yes to their $10,000 over asking counter. You can reject it and we can go shopping for another property. You can reject it, or you can modify it by saying, you know what, I think I'll stay with my original full price offer. I'd love to have an answer as quickly as possible so I know whether or not to go shopping for another property, right? That is a version of modify, right? Because you're modifying it back to the original deal. But then Georgia gets to make the decision, and Georgia gets to feel good about the fact that she has 3 different options. There's not a gun to her head. She still gets to make the choice. Make sense? Counsel your client, understanding that their goal is to be in this house. Confirm with them that this is their goal and then advise them accordingly. Don't make assumptions about any term. Guys, you heard this story. I'm going to tell it quickly, right? When I bought the house that I currently live in, it was, Debbie and I had listed it, right? So it was my own listing. Debbie and I were co-listing agents. And we went to the house. We walked through the house. My house was actually, I don't think my house was on the market just yet. The house I was leaving, and I was downsizing from a larger house to a house that was better for kids, in that I wanted flat land, and I needed a separate area for my father-in-law, who had moved in with us and lived with us for almost 15 years. And so I needed a separate area for him. We walked through this house. I went home and started to think about, that house actually works for what I'm looking for. We went back and we listed the property, and on the drive from the house back to the office, I turned to Debbie and I said, you know what, I think I'm going to make this complicated. I think I'm going to buy that house. And she laughed, and I said, no, I'm not kidding. I think I'm going to buy that house. Now, I sat at the listing table and said to the clients, look, in the market that we're in, right? I bought this property in 2002. No, that's not true. I bought this property in 2003. So if you remember, 2003 wasn't quite 2004 or 5, but it was getting there, right? Fast moving market. And I said to the seller clients, here's what we're going to do. I encourage you, we'll put it on the market on Monday. We'll have the open house on Tuesday. You'll collect offers all week and you'll just address all the offers on Sunday. I don't encourage you to accept any of the offers that you get until we have a full week's exposure and a weekend. We listed it on Sunday. We put it on the MLS on Monday. I made my offer on Monday, full price offer. And at the time I made the offer, obviously I removed myself from the listing side of it. And so Debbie took that side solo. And they took my advice. The advice I had given them on Sunday, they took that advice and said, thank you so much for that offer. We have lots of interest. We'll be accepting offers all week and we'll get back to everybody on Sunday. But, oh, crap. So long, boring story short, we got to Sunday, and Sunday became this bidding war, right? I think they kind of pulled it down to three offers. And these particular sellers said, okay, give us your highest and best. So we went and we overbid the property, and they came back and said, thank you, everybody gave us highest and best, and we still aren't satisfied. So give us highest and best again, like highester and bestester. Like, okay, really? All right, well, okay. So we went and did it again. Then they came back a third time. And I kept playing that game because I wanted to live in that house. And everybody around me was telling me I was crazy. Like, why are you paying so much over the asking price for this particular property? And I can tell you, this is the point I want to make, right? Number 14 says, counsel the client, understanding the goal is to be in the house. Confirm that, but then counsel them in that manner. Everybody who was telling me that I was crazy and I should stop, I should just go find another house, at some point, that was not helpful to me. As a matter of fact, it was annoying. Because all of a sudden, I felt like everybody around me was telling me how I should spend my money. And I didn't enjoy that. I wanted to live in that house, and I was willing to pay whatever I had to pay to win that house. I did win that house. And oh, by the way, almost 18 years later, I'm still living there. So what I paid for it, was it even really relevant? If I'm still living there 18 years later, for God's sake, who cares if I paid $40,000 or $50,000 or whatever I paid over the asking price? I think it was $47,000 to be exact, if I'm not mistaken. Debbie might remember that.
It was every bit of that. My contribution to this conversation is it is not your job as an agent to protect your client to the point that they don't get what they want. Do not protect them out of their house. Don't do that.
Yeah, when
Lay the
attorneys,
facts out, let them make their decision.
that's right. Even if their decision is a mistake, right? It could have been now counseling. If I were counseling myself, it is your job, right? So if you were representing me in that scenario, I would expect that you would say to me, okay, so Rick, let's just keep this in perspective, right? Let's go back to the comps. Know that this is where this is likely going to shake out. And if you choose to be above, if you have to sell in the next few years, you may not get this back out, right? If you have to turn this house around in the next 2 years or 5 years or so, let's have a business conversation around what this looks like. If you're planning to be there for a long time, I get it. But having that conversation is different than saying things like, why are you doing that? Why are you're way overpaying for that house, right? When attorneys do that to our clients, we call it over lawyering. Recognize that there is a realtor version of that as well. You get to support the client's decision and give them facts to make sure they're making smart decisions. Just because you don't think it's a smart decision doesn't mean it's not the right decision for them. Donna Gilbert.
So I just want to share, I put it in the chat, but recently, like since COVID, and it seems like every day these days, I use a version of that story, Rick. I use you as an example. I don't use your name and all that, but I use that when we're talking about potentially going over asking, or even going over what is conceived as fair market value, because fair market value is what people are willing to pay at that moment. But I use that story all the time just to illustrate that there are reasons why. Sorry for the barking.
Was that Neil barking?
No.
Oh, okay.
Mama dog.
Got it.
Deb, could I say something?
Of course, Carol, go ahead.
Okay, Deb, I want to thank you for what you just said. That's exactly how I feel. We have to be so careful not to protect our buyers away from the house they really want. I had that happen to me recently. These people wanted to buy a house in Westport after looking at many homes, and it was on for 1560. And the listing agent said there were other offers. So my clients asked me, do I believe that? I said, I have no way of knowing, but let me ask you, how much do you really want this house? And they said, we love it. Then is it worth it to you to gamble on whether or not this is true or not. Where do you want to go? We'll go 20,000 over. They paid 1.6 and they love the house. I didn't discourage them at all. That was their decision to make.
That's right. That's right. And it's such a valid point, right? It's their money. They get to spend it however they want. There are people who spend a whole lot more money on certain things than I do. Like for some people, cars are really important, right? For me, I really could care less what I drive. As long as it gets me to where I'm going, I don't, it's not important to me. Other people like are really fixated on driving a really nice car. They get to have that, they get to make that decision, right? I like to spend my money on travel. Some people think that the amount of money I spend on travel is too much. I will tell you that's not been the case the last 12 months, unfortunately, right? But you get to make choices about how you spend what is rightfully yours. Just remember that when you're looking to wrap your buyers in bubble wrap, right? That's not the job. The job is to show them the options and have a business consult, and then allow them to make the choice that makes the best sense for them, right? Here's what I'm going to say. There are some people that really struggle keeping their opinion to themselves. If that is you, just recognize that can get you into trouble, right? It's almost a version sometimes of practicing sales prevention. You think you're doing all the right things to help protect that client, when what you're really doing is you're preventing them from doing what it is they choose to do, and that's not the role, right? So be cautious around that, and thank you for all the stories around it, because it's an important concept. 15, present the information back to the listing agent based on what you're doing this back and forth, right? There's some idea about the fact that back and forth negotiating is kind of how this works. I would offer to you that there are lots of different ways to negotiate a property. I will tell you personally, what I choose to decide how much I'm willing to pay for the property, and then write the offer and present it. I don't decide to write it $25,000 lower and hope I can steal it away and all that stuff. I choose based on what I know the market to call for. I choose what I'm willing to pay, and then I write it up and I present it. And I tell the listing agent that when I send it to them. Hey, here's the offer on the property. That is our offer, right? So hopefully we can hear back from you shortly with an acceptance. We would love that. And if not, that's okay too, but that is the offer. I don't have the time for back and forth and back and up 2,000 and down 2,000. And oh my goodness, who can stand it, right? And so I just want to mention to you that a lot of agents, I think, believe that is the only way to negotiate, is that there's a price and there's an offer, and then everyone kind of goes ipsy boopsy boopsy bapsy. You don't have, that's not necessary, right? It is a path, but it's not always necessary. Sometimes buyers just can make an offer, and sellers can accept it. So you're going to continue the process until you have an agreement. Then you're going to make sure that the offer is rewritten with the new terms, price and terms, and a clean offer gets sent to the listing agent as quickly as possible. Remember to have the buyer client sign the new offer, and then again, ask when that's going to come back. Right nowadays, with electronic signatures, there is no reason why it should take more than a couple of hours to get a signed contract back. Right? I think the document says 24 hours. I don't think that's reasonable anymore. There's no, where is someone that can't sign an offer on their phone? Right? DocuSign and .loop make it very simple for a signature to come right away. Sometimes you have to ask for it. The house I bought this weekend, I had to go back to the listing agent and say, hey, just wanted to remind you that I don't have the signed contract yet. Would you like me to send it via DocuSign to you and to the sellers? Can I assist in that? Oh, no. Sorry. We'll get that done. Right, but I had to remind them. 24 hours later, especially in a market moving this quickly, anything could happen in 24 hours, right? You want their signature on something very, very quickly. Number 19, expect, and I would, again, this is a checklist for you, expect and check that the listing that you've accepted an offer on has been reported, right, in the MLS as either show or deposit. I know this says something different because it's the old term the MLS used to use, show or deposit. I would ask for that the moment you have your signed contract. It doesn't have to be contentious with the listing agent. As a matter of fact, I don't encourage contentiousness ever, frankly, with the listing agent. It's not the way you get people to a closing table. Instead, though, if I have a signed contract come back, I may have a quick text back and forth with Debbie to say, hey, thank you so much. We received the contract. The inspector is being told that we're confirming, full on for tomorrow. Hey, would you do me a favor? I have some anxious buyers. Could you do me a favor and just report that as under agreement in the MLS? I'm just going to ask the question. Do me that favor. What's the rule in the MLS for all status changes? Within what period of time?
48 hours?
I'm gonna take a
24?
guess. 24 hours?
So it used to be 48 hours. It changed in October to 24 hours. You now have 24 hours to report any changes of status. So that includes moving from active to either show or deposit, right? So be certain that you know what those rights are. And if it's not done within 24 hours, again, I'm going to get on the phone again. The next time I'm going to get on the phone with Debbie again. Hey, Debbie, I just noticed that the property wasn't reported. It has been 24 hours. I know how busy everybody is. I wondered, is there any way that you can get that done for us ASAP? Again, I have anxious buyers who are looking to make sure that gets taken care of. How can I help? Anything I can do to help to get that done. Now, what if Debbie says, you know what, Rick, I understand that everyone wants that under reported. However, the sellers have asked me not to report that until after the inspections are done on Thursday. So now the sellers have asked to have it not reported. What do you do in that scenario?
You have to report it? Like, isn't that by law or something? Yeah, right?
Well, so it is by the MLS rules, right? And so,
Okay.
so if Debbie came back to me and said that, what I may say back is something to the effect of, you know what, I understand. I have sellers who ask that of me sometimes as well. Unfortunately, the MLS says they don't have that right to withhold that status change. And again, I do have some anxious buyers. I wondered if you could have a conversation with the sellers, explaining to them that even though they've asked for it, it's not something that you can accommodate. And let's get that reported. And so Debbie and I are having a conversation. At some point, if it's still not reported, I'll just take my contract and send it off to the MLS and say, look, I have an accepted offer on this property. It's been 24, 48 hours. It's not reported. Can you please get that taken care of? And the MLS will take care of it for you. I don't love doing the I'm going over your head version of that unless I absolutely have to. I'd rather just continue to ask in a kind fashion about how I can help the listing agent get that accomplished and explain why. Explain how I have handled it in the past when sellers have asked me that. Sometimes listing agents aren't certain how to handle it and they don't have anyone to ask. So if you help them out by saying, hey, you know what, I completely understand. Here's how I handled that the last time a seller asked that of me, if that's helpful. Sometimes they'll take your words right back to the seller and get that taken care of for you, right? Again, it's not a contentious conversation. If I call Debbie and say, you know, I don't know what your problem is. I've asked this 3 times in the last 48 hours and it's still not done. Do you want the buyers to walk? You've all heard agents speak that way, right? Those of you who have been around for longer than not, you've all heard that come back at you sometimes, or be spoken outwards. It's just not. It doesn't help, right? It doesn't help. Treat colleagues like colleagues, and always come from a position of assisting them in getting us all to a closing, right? When you come from a position of education, which doesn't mean finger wagging, right? It doesn't mean being, what's the word? Oh, I can't think of the word. It's right on the tip of my tongue. It'll come to me later. So I'll keep going.
A scold.
Yeah, no, so what's that word? Like when it's not you being a superior, it's not you condescending, that's the word, right? It's not you being condescending, right? It's you coming from a position of contribution. How can I help? How can I help? How can I help? How can I help us both? How can I help all of us, all parties, get to the next step, get to a closing, right? And just remember, you do have the rules on your side. And today, more than ever in the history of our MLS, the rules matter because they now have a system in place to make sure that the rules are adhered to, right? After 30 years of not so much. So use that to your advantage if you need it. All right, so number 20, once the offer has come back and it's all signed, you're going to put all the paperwork together and make sure that gets to your client's attorney, and as well as to the MCA in the Market Center, right? You have 3 days to get that to your MCA. We're about to launch our concierge services, which means you'll have an opportunity to get that to kind of a gatekeeper in the Market Center who will review the documentation, and once it's confirmed that it's all in order, get passed to our assistants who will actually upload that into Command and do the compliance work for you. That is not today, but it is on its way in the next 2 weeks or so. So do watch for that. Just remember, you have 72 hours. And on the buyer side, you have 72 hours to make sure that check, whatever that earnest money check is, gets deposited into an escrow account. Alex.
So you just mentioned something, and I don't know if I'm aware of it. What are consequences for delayed reporting?
Good question. I don't know specifically from the MLS. I think the first thing what ultimately they'll do is they'll ask it to be done. And then if it's not done, they follow themselves up and they just change the status. I don't know if there is fines. I think if they change the status, to avoid the fines because clearly it's outside of the rules. So they take the liberty of changing it for you once they have a signed document in front of themselves that they can see that it's actually under agreement. I think that's how it works.
So when you said it's been 30 years, what were you suggesting?
I was suggesting that the MLS of the past didn't have a whole lot of teeth. And so they weren't as attentive to everyone playing by the rules as they are today. Whether that's fines or action taken or whatnot, they just weren't very attentive, or as attentive, I should say, as they are today. Number 22, create and submit a green sheet and/or commission on the commissions tab, right? So 2 ways still, I encourage you to move away from green sheets. If you've never learned green sheets, don't learn them. Just push through in Command and learn how to submit your commissions on the commissions tab. Because green sheets are the old way of doing things pre-Command. They are still around for people who haven't shifted entirely into Command, but they will not be around for much longer, right? So it's if you haven't learned green sheets, it's silly to learn them only to have them go away in the next few months. So just get some training on the commissions tab. We will be offering starting next week weekly trainings on each piece of working through your transaction in Command all over again. Plus you have one-on-ones that begin. The links will go out tonight for later this week if you want to grab a one-on-one for something Command related. All right, in our last few remaining minutes, number 23, be prepared with the buyer's attorney, right? We talked about that before when Jerona asked that question. You've got to be prepared, especially now that we're writing the checks to those attorneys, right? You don't want to have, when things are moving so quickly, trust me, listing agents don't want to hear from you. We're not sure who the attorney is. We'll get back to you. And then 3 days later, there's still no attorney, right? That to me, especially in a fast moving market with multiple offers, is an absolute reason to decide that this offer is not the one we're going to stick with. Let's move to somebody who's actually prepared. So have these conversations up front, have those people chosen, know who the attorney is going to be prior to writing the offer, know who the inspectors are going to be, because the listing agent's going to want that information as soon as there's a signed contract to move everything forward. And then of course, you're going to schedule the home inspection and the septic inspection with those inspectors. You're going to call the buyer's client's attorney and introduce yourself if they're not using someone that you have recommended, right? If for some reason they're using someone that they brought to the table, you do want to just call and introduce yourself to make sure that they know who you are and that you are the agent involved in all of this. You're going to make sure that the clients have received a copy of, make sure that you have received a copy of any contract information data that the listing agent has prepared. Sometimes there's a document that has all the parties listed on it and all the data from the transaction. It's typically prepared by the listing agent. And so if you can grab a copy of that, it is oftentimes helpful to keep with all of your paperwork. 27 and 28, attend the inspections. As the buyer's agent, you do want to attend your inspections, right? At some point, this may be a leverage opportunity for you, but until you're big enough to have that be a leverage point for you, I would absolutely encourage you to attend the inspections, especially if you're the one who's going to be negotiating any issues that come up at the inspection. It's difficult to put yourself in the shoes of negotiating through the issues if you haven't actually attended, right? So attend those inspections. You're there for a reason. You're there, A, to learn, and you're there to ask questions that the buyers maybe don't know to ask. Maybe you have first-time home buyers, right? And so maybe you're helping them ask questions of the inspector. You may sometimes be there to help the buyer clients understand what the inspector means when the inspector grabs his heart and chest and says, oh my goodness, look at all this mold, right? You may have to be there to help explain what that means, because what mold means sometimes in a shower scenario is mildew, right? Mildew is a version of mold. And sometimes the inspector doesn't say, oh, ick, there's mildew, we should probably get some soft scrub. He clutches his chest and says, oh my goodness, look at all this mold, right? So sometimes you're there to help translate what the inspector is saying, which does not mean minimize any issues. It means help translate. If the issue should be minimized, like get some soft scrub and spray it and clear up the mildew in the shower, that's a different conversation than if the attic space is all full of undefined black mold, and then you have to maybe have somebody else come in. But you get my point, right? So sometimes you're there to help translate. Septic inspection as well. We will finish the anatomy of a buyer transaction tomorrow, first thing, 4 o'clock, right? We will not talk about family reunion tomorrow. So we'll get started right on time and dive right in and finish up the anatomy of a buyer transaction. So somebody remind me that we are on step number 29. And where we're at is you've done the inspections. And so now you're going to be gathering the reports. And so we'll walk you through exactly how that should look, what you should be on alert for, and how to work that through with the buyer to make sure that the transaction continues to move forward and still be on their side. So I look forward to finishing that up with you tomorrow. Guys, it's always a pleasure to spend time with you. Have a lovely evening. I wish you all a fond dinner, or at least a delicious dinner, and a fond farewell for your evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rick.
Sure thing.
Have a good night.
You too.
Bye,
When
thank
is it?
you.
Night,
When
everyone.
is-